We are learning more about the standoff with North Korea and President Trump's inflammatory threats. We're going to take a look at the politics, what's going on behind the scenes. Then our legal panel joins us to discuss the latest in the Russia probe, including the FBI raid of Paul Manafort's home. Also, our very own Mark Furnish, he'll discuss his newest client. I think you heard of him, the Mexican drug kingpin El Chapo. Mark will be calling in from an undisclosed location. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. You know, you have multiple reports out now saying that President Trump's fire and fury threat to North Korea was totally improvised. Time says he was told about progress North Korea was making in its nuclear program, and that got him riled up right before he blurted out the threat during a scheduled appearance that was supposed to be discussing the opioid crisis. Now, after our president threatened North Korea, Kim Jong-un, he threatened the closest U.S. territory, that would be Guam.
It is scary, you know, it is something that we can't take lightly.
Residents of the Pacific island of Guam reacting to North Korea's latest threat, saying it is seriously considering a plan to target the U.S. territory home to crucial American military bases and more than 7,000 U.S. forces.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States.
President Trump, with an overt military threat of his own, ratcheting up tensions with the nuclear-armed nation. This all comes as the latest assessment from U.S. intelligence is that North Korea can produce miniature nuclear warheads small enough to fit inside an intercontinental ballistic missile.
It is a very grave situation, not quite a crisis. The fact that real tough sanctions have been placed on North Korea and they're reacting rather violently.
Secretary of Defense James Mattis also weighing in with a statement making clear that North Korea's actions will, quote, be grossly overmatched by ours, end quote, calling on the country to cease actions that would lead to the end of its regime, a subtle difference from the president who promised to take action on North Korea's threats.
They will be met with fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which this world has never seen before.
And the Secretary of State also holding firm on the president's tough talk in Guam.
What the president was doing is sending a strong message to North Korea in language that Kim Jong-un would understand, because he doesn't seem to understand diplomatic language.
But it is that language that certainly has upset more than a few folks on both sides of the aisle. And it's certainly not been tempered, some of that reaction. Take a listen to what Arizona Senator John McCain had to say. He, of course, a fellow Republican.
The great leaders that I've seen, they don't threaten unless they are ready to act. Yeah. And I'm not sure that President Trump is ready to act. And so maybe it'll turn out all right. He's the president. I'm not. But I don't think that some of the great leaders that I have admired would have taken that same path.
And take a listen to Leon Panetta. He's former defense secretary and CIA head under President Obama. Panetta said the following, quote, "You've got two bullies chiding each other with outrageous comments, and it doesn't help the situation in terms of trying to resolve something that has to be resolved peacefully because the consequences of nuclear war would be devastating." The question is, does Trump get so frustrated with the North Korean leader who's yelling every other day that he feels that somehow the North Korean leader is attacking his manhood? Think about that. All right, and for more on this, we are joined by Washington Post senior political reporter Aaron Blake. Before we even get into the substance of what was said and the moving parts that have happened since, to your best understanding, did Donald Trump say those comments in a vacuum without consultation? Was this kind of on the back of a napkin and he went ex-temp here, or was this a coordinated response that everybody from his administration, let alone DOD, was on board with?
We've gotten a couple different indications about this. The first is that, yes, it was a completely kind of off-the-cuff comment that he made with very little planning. That's generally how he speaks. The second version that we've gotten is that, yes, it may have been technically not totally planned out or written out, but that it was very consistent with the outlines of how they wanted to talk about this issue. They wanted to have a very kind of in-your-face, a harsh message from the president, a little bit more of a toned down reassurance from his aides, and then they've got basically what amounts to a little bit of a good cop, bad cop approach going to the whole North Korea situation.
To that good cop, bad cop, I hear Secretary Tillerson basically saying, everyone calm down, we can sleep at night here, let's not, freak out, but yet I'm hearing fire and fury and power like we've never seen before from the president, and by the way, other talking heads that supposedly are representative of him. That's intentional? They're trying to send mixed messages? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, and I think if you look at the message from Defense Secretary Jim Mattis today, he was a little bit more in the middle. He said that this is not something that is imminently going to threaten the United States homeland, that we're not looking at going into a war right now. But he also made clear in that statement that if North Korea were to do something, the capabilities of the United States and its allies to quickly put down any offensive maneuvers by North Korea would be dealt with very quickly. The country would pay a steep price immediately. So I think the administration is happy to have a message out there of we will hit you back really hard if you do something out of line. But they also want to reassure people, of course, that this is not a war that's going to start anytime soon.
To that end, how freaked out are people, though, in Tokyo and Seoul, in capitals around this world, let alone, our friends in Guam? It's easy to say this, from D.C., but what if you're within the eye line, let's say, of the DMZ?
Or even the west coast of the United States, which is what the North Koreans are trying to eventually reach here. That's the downside of this kind of rhetoric. It's getting tough with the North Korean regime, but it also risks inflaming things, and that's got to be a little bit concerning, of course, to the people who are closer to North Korea, and it's also concerning, I would wager, to people who are not totally convinced that President Trump is a steady hand. There was a CBS poll this week that showed 61% rather, of people were uneasy about him leading the North Korea situation as president. So there is certainly a downside to this kind of talk from the president, from his advisors, given the concerns about his temperament.
We shared with our audience Senator McCain's comments on this. To that end, where is the red line of the president, and have the North Koreans already crossed it in their response? Since we're dealing with a game of one-upsmanship with rhetoric, where is the red line now for this administration?
Well, on Tuesday, when the president made the comment about fire and fury being inflicted upon North Korea, it sounded like the red line for him was if North Korea continued to threaten the United States. Well, of course, we quickly saw in short order that North Korea was going to threaten Guam, so that didn't seem to be the red line. I think if you look more practically speaking at H.R. McMaster, the National Security Advisor's comments this weekend, the red line that he set in that interview was not just a North Korea threat, but a demonstrated and believed threat to the U.S. mainland. Basically that not only would they have missiles that carried nuclear weapons on them, but that these missiles would be capable of reaching the U.S. mainland. We don't know that at this point that North Korea has the ability to fire those missiles that long range. Of course, they're heading in that direction. So we'll see what happens. But I would say that that is the more established red line that we're talking about here, especially given earlier on Wednesday when Secretary of State Rex Tillerson seemed to kind of rein in the red line that the president had set on Tuesday.
Aaron, finally, I know this is a difficult question to answer, but you're far closer to it than we are. We've talked ad nauseum about the polls this week and where they stand, and even on more specifically, trustworthiness, belief where the administration, more specifically, the president's taking us in a direction. There even were snap polls in terms of his handling as it relates to North Korea. Yet we're also getting reports that he's getting twice a day dossiers in effect of just positive stories or reassuring of how he comes across in the media, whether it's with chyrons or flattering articles or even photos of him looking, I guess, powerful. How much of a concern is there on the Hill that the president's too far removed from what the public thinks and wants as it relates to his handling of a possible nuclear crisis?
Well, I don't know that I could speak necessarily to the Hill. I can say that this is a concern that has been a long-standing one during the 2016 campaign and into his presidency. I talked before about the president's temperament. That was always his number one liability as a candidate. People voted for him in spite of their belief that he wasn't presidential, didn't have a steady hand on these kinds of things. I think maybe the most telling poll that I saw during the campaign was during the general election when a pollster asked, who do you want to have control of the nuclear codes as president if you had to choose between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump? This was at a time when the race was somewhat close. But on that question of who you want to have the nuclear codes, Hillary Clinton led by a 22-point margin, 56% to 34%. We are now confronting a question that many Americans hoped that we'd never have to confront, which is the idea that the president would have his finger on the nuclear button, would get us into some kind of a nuclear conflict. I think that it may cause some people who hope to get some conservative policy agenda items through, and maybe that stuff like this wouldn't happen, may cause them to rethink their previous assumptions about what voting for Donald Trump would be like.
You know, it's amazing when you're trying to find comparatives in history. You have to either go to Truman after he dropped the first bomb, or you have to go to the Bay of Pigs to find something where we are. As much as everyone wants to tamp down the rhetoric, literally, that's the kind of sound bites you have to go for to find comparatives. But Aaron, I certainly appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up next, everyone, Paul Manafort and Michael Flynn, they're in the crosshairs of the special counsel, Bob Mueller, and his crack team of attorneys. We're going to bring in our legal panel, take a look at the latest as it relates to the Russia probe, and a whole lot more in the legal world.